She inherited an old cabin as a joke from her in-laws, but what she found inside changed her life. Jessica Anderson held her youngest son tight against her chest as he whimpered, feeling the weight of the judgmental stare that had been following her for weeks. The other boy, clinging to her skirt, sobbed without stopping. It was then that the lawyer opened the sealed envelope and read the last wishes of the deceased. Jessica heard her name mentioned, and for a brief moment, her heart filled with a foolish hope. Perhaps even after everything, her husband's family had recognized that she also deserved something, that her children deserved a secure future. To Jessica Anderson, I leave the property located at the top of Pinewood Ridge, the lawyer announced in a neutral voice. The silence that followed was broken by a laugh, then another, and another. Within seconds, the law office was echoing with laughter that made Jessica's stomach turn. The old cabin? Her mother-in-law, Barbara, could barely catch her breath from laughing so hard. That thing falling apart? It's a joke, it must be, commented her father-in-law, Richard, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. Not even the rats want to live there anymore. Jessica felt her face burn as she held the rusty keys the lawyer was holding out to her. Little Ethan, just 4 years old, tugged harder on her skirt, frightened by his grandparents' loud laughter. There's more, the lawyer continued, adjusting his glasses. The beneficiary may not sell, rent, or transfer the property for the next 5 years. This clause was specifically requested so that she may learn the value of honest work. More laughter. Jessica felt her legs tremble. The baby, Noah, started crying for real now, sensing his mother's tension. Honest work, Barbara clapped her hands, as if she knew what that was. She's lived off my son since day one. Mummy, what's happening? Ethan pulled on her sleeve, his voice trembling. Nothing, sweetheart. Let's go home. What home? Richard taunted. You live on our property, remember? And we want the keys back tomorrow. It was already very generous of us to let you stay there all these weeks. Jessica raised her chin, taking a deep breath so she wouldn't fall apart right there. She took the keys, put Noah in the stroller, and held Ethan's hand firmly. Thank you for the clarification, Doctor, she said to the lawyer, completely ignoring her in-laws. As she left the office, she heard Barbara shout after her, I hope you enjoy living without running water and electricity. That place doesn't even have a proper bathroom. The laughter followed her down the stairs, echoing in her mind like funeral bells for all that remained of her old life. Jessica didn't sleep that night. In the small guest house that her in-laws allowed her to use, she rocked Noah in her arms, while Ethan slept restlessly on the mattress beside her. The savings she had left would barely cover 2 weeks' rent anywhere in the city. And now she had a property she couldn't sell, in a place that, judging by her in-laws' laughter, was worse than nothing. She thought of Michael, her husband. When they first met, he seemed different from his family. He worked as a history teacher at a public school. He had ideals, dreams of making a difference in the world. His family had always looked down on his choices, on the simple girl who worked as a nursing assistant and came from a humble neighborhood. You don't belong in our circle, Barbara said the first time they met. My son deserves someone from a good family with a proper upbringing. Michael defended Jessica that day, and in the months that followed too. But the family's pressure slowly ate away at the relationship, turning the marriage into a silent battlefield. When she got pregnant with Ethan, Barbara cried as if it were the end of the world. You're trapping my son with this pregnancy, she accused. But Michael loved the boys. That Jessica never doubted. In his last months of life, as the illness consumed him, he would hold her hand and apologize. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger, he would whisper. I'm sorry for my family. Now he was gone, taking with him the only protection Jessica had against the cruelty of the Andersons. The next morning, Jessica packed the few things she owned into 2 old suitcases and some bags. Barbara appeared at 8 in the morning, demanding the house key. I didn't expect to see you still here, she said with a cold smile. I thought you would have already run off to your wonderful shack. We're leaving now. Great. I'll hire someone to clean everything. I don't want a single sign that you were here. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Ethan held Jessica's hand tightly as they walked to the bus stop. The boy had dark eyes like his father, always unruly brown hair, and a sensitivity that broke Jessica's heart. He understood more than a 4-year-old should. "Doesn't Grandma like us?" he asked quietly. Jessica knelt before him, adjusting the thin coat that barely protected him from the morning chill. "Sometimes people get sad and take it out on others. It's not your fault, my love. But I was good." "You are the best boy in the world." Jessica kissed his forehead. "And we're going to be okay. You can trust Mommy." The bus took 40 minutes to arrive. Then it was another 2 hours of travel to the stop closest to Pinewood Ridge. The driver looked at her with pity when Jessica got off with the suitcases, the children, and no clear direction. "Miss, are you sure this is the place?" he asked. "There's nothing around here." "I have an address." Jessica showed him the paper the lawyer had given her. "Old Ridge Road, kilometer 12. That's far, about 4 kilometers up the ridge. And the road is bad, you know. No car goes up there." Jessica thanked him and started walking. Noah slept heavily in the stroller, but the dirt and rock path made the little wheels jam every meter. Ethan tried to help, pushing with his small hands. "Mommy, I'm tired," he complained after half an hour. "Just a little bit more, son." But it wasn't just a little bit. The climb seemed endless, and as the sun began to set, Jessica felt panic tightening her chest. They couldn't spend the night in the open with 2 small children. That's when she saw the wooden structure emerging from the trees, if you could even call it a structure. The planks were rotting, the roof had huge holes, and there was no door in the main entrance, just a dark opening that looked like the mouth of some nightmare. "Is this where we're going to live?" Ethan asked. And for the first time, Jessica heard real fear in her son's voice. She swallowed dryly, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "Yes. But we're going to make it really nice. You'll see." They entered carefully. The floor creaked with every step. There was dirt everywhere, spiderwebs in the corners, and a smell of mold so strong that Jessica had to cover her nose. A broken window let the wind in, whistling through the cracks in the old wood. "Mommy, I'm cold," Ethan whined. Jessica found a corner that seemed safer, away from the wall that threatened to collapse. She spread an old blanket on the floor and sat down with the boys. Noah woke up and started crying, hungry. "Shh, my love." Jessica opened her bag, looking for the bottle she had prepared before leaving. "Here it is." As the baby fed, Ethan snuggled next to her, shivering. Night fell quickly on the ridge, and with it came a biting cold. Jessica had a flashlight, but she needed to save the batteries. She turned it on only when the darkness became complete. The noises started then. Creaks, cracks, sounds of small animals running across the roof. Ethan clung to her, and Jessica hummed softly, trying to calm the children and herself. She had brought a little food, enough for maybe 3 days. After that, she didn't know what she would do. The money she had left would barely be enough to get back to the city, and for what? She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. "You did this on purpose," she whispered into the void, thinking of Michael. "You left me with them. You left me like this." But the anger didn't last. It never lasted, because Michael had been a victim too, in his own way. The Anderson family had this ability to suck the life out of people, to turn everything to ashes. Ethan finally fell asleep, exhausted. Noah did too. Jessica stayed awake, holding them both, listening to the sounds of the night and wondering how she had reached this point. Trained as a nursing technician, she had always worked, always supported herself. But Michael's family made her quit her job when she got pregnant with Ethan. "A woman from the Anderson family doesn't work," Richard decreed. "You will take care of the house and my grandson." And she obeyed, because Michael asked her to, because it seemed easier not to fight. Now she saw how foolish she had been, without a job for years, without references, with nothing but a cabin falling apart and 2 children to raise. It started to rain around midnight. The leaks were so many that Jessica had to move the children 3 times until she found a relatively dry corner. The sound of the rain on the hole-riddled roof was deafening. "Mommy?" Ethan woke up frightened. "It's okay, son, it's just rain." But it wasn't okay. Water started coming in through the walls, forming puddles on the rotten wooden floor. Jessica hugged the boys tighter, shielding them with her own body as she got wet. On that endless night, Jessica cried for the first time since the day of the will. She cried softly, so as not to wake the children while the rain washed her tears and carried away the last shred of hope she still held onto. When dawn came, the sun revealed the extent of the disaster. The cabin looked even worse in the daylight, walls stained with dampness, a floor sagging in places, and that impossible smell of mold and abandonment. Jessica knew she had to act. The children needed a halfway safe place, food, warmth. She let them sleep on the driest blanket she could find and went out to explore. At the back of the property, she found an old well. She threw a stone and heard the plop of the water below. At least they had water, even if she had to haul it up bucket by bucket. Further on, she found a pile of old firewood, covered by a torn tarp. It was damp, but maybe it would dry in the sun. It was then that she heard a noise. Voices coming from the road. Jessica hid behind the cabin, her heart racing. Had her in-laws come to mock her in person? But the voices were different, older, softer. Two elderly women were walking along the trail, carrying baskets. "It's been decades since I've seen smoke from that chimney," one of them said. "Me neither, Mary. I thought it was just my imagination." Jessica came out of her hiding place, hesitant. The two women stopped, surprised. "Good morning," Jessica greeted, feeling strangely vulnerable. "Good Lord." The older of the two, a woman with completely white hair, widened her eyes. "Are you living here?" "I'm trying to." The other woman, a bit younger but still a good 60 years old, looked Jessica up and down. She saw the wet clothes, the tired face, and something in her expression softened. "Alone?" she asked. "With my children, 2 little boys." The women exchanged a look that Jessica couldn't interpret. "My name is Mary," said the white-haired one, "and this here is Susan. We live at the foot of the ridge, on the other side. We saw a light here last night." "I'm Jessica." "Jessica," Susan repeated the name slowly as if testing it. "Do you know the story of this place?" "I know it was left to me as a cruel joke. My in-laws thought it was funny to give me a ruin that I can't sell." "Your in-laws?" Mary closed her eyes for a moment. "What are their names?" "Richard and Barbara Anderson." The silence that followed was heavy. The two women looked at each other again, and Jessica saw something pass between them. Anger, old pain, recognition. "Come in," Susan finally said. "We need to talk." But before they could move, Ethan appeared in the cabin doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Mommy?" "I'm here, son." "Noah's crying." Jessica ran inside, picked Noah up in her arms. The baby was wet and hungry. The two older ladies followed her, and Mary let out a heavy sigh upon seeing the child's condition. "This isn't right," she murmured. "Not one bit right." Susan opened the basket she was carrying and took out bread, fruit, a jar with something that smelled like stew. "Eat first," she said firmly. "Then we'll talk." Ethan attacked the food with a hunger that broke Jessica's heart. She ate herself while breastfeeding Noah, who finally calmed down. "Did you come all the way here just to bring food?" Jessica asked, suspicious of the sudden kindness. "No." Mary pulled up an old chair, tested if it would hold her weight, and sat down. "We came because this cabin, it has a history the Andersons tried to bury a long time ago." "What history?" Susan took a deep breath before starting. "In the 60s, this wasn't an abandoned cabin. It was an inn, the Mountain Ridge Inn, known throughout the region for its hospitality, its wonderful food, and the owner who ran it masterfully. Mrs. Elizabeth," Mary continued, her eyes shining with held-back tears. "She was Richard Anderson's first wife." Jessica almost dropped her bread. "His first wife? I've never heard of her." "Of course not." Susan smiled bitterly. "The Andersons erased every trace of her from the family history, as if she never existed." "Elizabeth was my cousin," Mary revealed. 12 years older than me, beautiful, smart, hard-working. When she married Richard, he was just the son of a family with some money, but nothing special. It was her work, this inn, that started building the fortune. Jessica listened in silence, trying to process it. The inn was famous, Susan went on. People came from far away. Elizabeth had a special way with things. She grew herbs, made natural remedies, cared for the guests as if they were family. And there was the spring. Spring? Mineral water, healing, some said. There was a natural spring here on the property. People came to fetch the water. They believed it cured illnesses, gave strength. True or not, it brought business. It brought money. Mary wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Richard saw her success and became more and more greedy. He wanted more, always more. He started pressuring Elizabeth, demanding she work more, host more guests, expand. But my cousin was tired. She had given birth to a son. She wanted to rest a little. A son? Jessica felt a chill down her spine. Michael, Susan confirmed. Your husband was Elizabeth's son. Jessica's world spun. Michael had never mentioned that Richard had been married before. He never said anything about a mother other than Barbara. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. But how? Richard wanted to get rid of her, Mary said, her voice trembling with old anger. Elizabeth was strong. She didn't bow down easily, so he started making her life a living hell. He brought Barbara to the inn, a young girl from the city, and flirted openly. He humiliated Elizabeth in front of the guests, and it got worse. He started sabotaging her, Susan continued. He adulterated the supplies, made the suppliers cut ties, spread lies about the quality of the inn. Gradually, the guests stopped coming, and when the money dried up, Richard accused her of incompetence. And the spring? Jessica asked, sensing there was more. The two women exchanged glances. Richard fenced off the spring, Mary revealed. Said it was his private property, not Elizabeth's. He prevented people from accessing the water. Without the spring, without the guests, the inn went bankrupt in a matter of months. And Elizabeth? He threw her out, Susan said softly. Literally threw her out of the house. He took the son, took everything and sent her away. Elizabeth had nothing, no proof that she had a right to the property. Back then, women, well, we didn't have the same rights. Richard got everything legally. My cousin left, Mary continued, wiping away tears. It broke her heart to leave Michael, but Richard threatened her, said if she tried to fight for custody, he would destroy her completely, and Elizabeth believed him. So she left and never came back. Where is she now? Jessica asked. We don't know, Mary admitted. We lost contact decades ago. The last letter we got was about 30 years ago. It said she was fine, but didn't say where she was. I think she was afraid Richard would find her. Jessica held Noah tighter. Michael. Her Michael had grown up without his real mother, raised by Barbara, never knowing the truth. Did he know? She asked. Did Michael know about his mother? We don't know, Susan admitted. Richard said the mother died in childbirth. Michael grew up believing that, and Barbara, and well, she did everything to erase any memory of Elizabeth. That's why the cabin, Jessica understood. That's why they gave this to me. It's the final insult. They gave me the place that destroyed the first wife. Perhaps, Mary considered, or perhaps it's something more. The Andersons have always been cruel, but also arrogant. Leaving you with this property, it's like they're saying you'll never be able to do anything with it, that you'll fail like they thought Elizabeth failed. Jessica looked around the ruined cabin. She thought of Elizabeth, of everything she had built here, of everything that was stolen from her. But Elizabeth didn't fail, she said slowly. She was sabotaged, robbed. Exactly. Susan smiled for the first time. And maybe it's time for the truth to come out. In the following weeks, Jessica tried to make the cabin minimally habitable. Mary and Susan came regularly, bringing food, clothes for the children, tools. But it wasn't enough. The cold came through the walls, the rain still came through the roof, and Ethan developed a worrying cough. He needs to see a doctor, Susan insisted, hearing the boy cough. I don't have money for a doctor. The health clinic is free, Jessica. It's too far and I can't leave Noah alone to go down the ridge with Ethan. That's when Mary had an idea. Mrs. Ruth, she said. She lives nearby, just over the hill. She was a midwife her whole life, knows about natural remedies. Maybe she can help. I don't want to bother anyone. Nonsense. Susan was already getting up. I'll go get her. Mrs. Ruth arrived an hour later. She was a woman in her 70s, short, plump, with small but sharp eyes. She examined Ethan carefully, listened to his chest, looked at his throat. It's bronchitis, she diagnosed, caused by this cold and damp. He needs guaco tea with honey, and this boy needs to stay dry and warm. There's no dry or warm here, Jessica said, frustration leaking into her voice. Ruth looked around, assessing. We need to fix the roof first and seal the walls, but that costs money. Money I don't have. Then we'll do it differently. Ruth had a determined glint in her eyes. Mary, Susan, do you know Margaret, Dorothy, Josephine? We do. Bring them tomorrow, and their tools. Jessica didn't understand, but the next morning she began to. 7 elderly women appeared at the cabin, each one carrying something. Nails, hammers, old but still useful planks, cans of paint, pieces of canvas. What's happening? Jessica asked, astonished. A community effort, Margaret, a thin lady with graying hair, announced. That's how things are done here. When someone needs help, we help. But I can't pay. Nobody asked for payment. Dorothy, a robust woman with a motherly air, was already assessing the roof. Let's get to work. We'll talk while we work. And they worked. For 3 whole days, those women fixed the roof, sealed the cracks in the walls, and cleaned every corner of the cabin. Ethan and Noah stayed under the care of Mrs. Ruth, who fed them and told them stories. As they worked, the women talked, and Jessica learned that each of them had a history with the Andersons. Margaret had lost her small market when Richard opened a supermarket and practiced prices below cost until he bankrupted the competition. Dorothy had her land invaded by the Andersons' fences, and when she complained, she was threatened. Josephine worked in the Andersons' house for years and was fired for no reason, without receiving the severance pay she was entitled to. That's how they are, explained Mary. They destroy people and then erase them from memory, as if we never existed. Why didn't you do anything? Jessica asked. Why didn't you report them? The women laughed, but it was a laugh without joy. To whom, dear? Margaret shook her head. The local judge is Richard's cousin. The sheriff played cards with him every Friday. Who would listen to us? We tried, some of us, Susan admitted, but it never came to anything, and those who insisted too much. Well, bad things happened. Nothing that could be proven, of course. But they happened. Jessica felt the anger growing inside her, not just for herself, but for all those women, for Elizabeth, for all the victims of the Andersons. There has to be a way, she murmured. Perhaps, Mrs. Ruth said, standing in the doorway with Noah in her arms. But first, you need to survive. And your children, too. With the cabin more livable, Jessica could think beyond immediate survival. Mary brought boxes that had been stored in her attic. They were Elizabeth's, she explained, things she left behind when she went away. Richard was going to throw everything out, but I managed to save some. Jessica opened the boxes with trembling hands. Inside, she found notebooks, dozens of them, all written in careful handwriting, detailing recipes, techniques, notes about guests, about medicinal plants, about the inn. She documented everything, Mary said fondly. She said that one day it would be useful. Jessica spent the night reading. She discovered an Elizabeth she never knew, a brilliant, creative woman who turned a simple cabin into a thriving business. A woman who knew herbs and plants like no one else, who healed wounds and illnesses with her preparations. A woman who loved that place with every fiber of her being. And she discovered something else. In one of the notebooks, hidden among bread recipes and growing instructions, there was a map, drawn by hand, with specific markings. And a phrase, in case you need it, the truth is here. Jessica studied the map. It seemed to indicate a spot at the back of the property, near where she had seen some stacked stones. The next morning, she left the children with Mrs. Ruth and went to investigate. She dug where the map indicated, her hands getting dirty with soil, and she found it. A metal box, rusty but still intact. Inside, documents, many documents. the original property deeds, showing that Elizabeth had bought the land with her own money, even before marrying Richard. Contracts signed by her with suppliers. Receipts proving the investments she made in the inn. And what's more, documents showing how Richard had forged papers, how he transferred everything into his name through falsification. But there was something even more important. A legal document, signed and notarized, where Elizabeth temporarily ceded the property's administration to Richard during a recovery period after Michael's birth. Temporarily, never permanently. "This changes everything," Jessica whispered to herself. She ran back to the cabin, found Mary, and showed her the documents. Elizabeth didn't lose the property legally, Jessica explained, her hands trembling. She was still the owner. Richard forged the papers. Mary held the documents carefully as if they were made of glass. This means that this property never should have gone to Richard, that he stole it. And if he stole it, then everything he built on top of it is fraudulent, Mary completed, her eyes wide. "I need a lawyer," Jessica said. "A lawyer who isn't afraid of the Andersons." "I know someone," Susan, who had arrived during the conversation, offered. "My nephew, David. He just graduated, opened an office in town. He owes nothing to the Andersons." Jessica went to town the next day, the documents carefully stored in a folder. David Miller had a small, simple office, but his eyes lit up when he saw the papers. "This is serious," he said, examining each document. "Very serious. If we can prove their authenticity, they are authentic. They have the notary stamps, the notarized signatures." "The Andersons will fight," David warned. "They will use all their power. It will be a difficult battle." "I'm ready to fight," Jessica said with a determination she didn't know she possessed. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out. Now continuing. David prepared the lawsuit. Filing it was easy. The hard part was what came next. 3 days after the lawsuit was filed, Richard showed up at the cabin. Jessica was in the back hanging laundry when she heard the car noise. Her blood ran cold. She ran inside, grabbed Noah, and called for Ethan. "Come on, let's stay in here." But Richard was already at the door. Older, stooped by time, but his eyes still had that familiar cruelty. "So it's true," he said, looking around. "You really are living in this dump." Jessica placed herself between him and the children. "What do you want?" "I want to know if you've completely lost your mind." Richard entered without an invitation. "A lawsuit against me, with forged papers." "The papers aren't forged. It's your documents that are false." Richard laughed, but it was a nervous laugh. "You don't know who you're messing with, girl. I can destroy you with one phone call." "Then why don't you?" Jessica challenged, surprising herself. "Why did you come here in person?" "I came to offer a solution." Richard changed his tactic. $50,000. You drop the lawsuit, sign a document giving up any rights to the property, and you get the money. You can start a new life far away from here. $50,000. It was more money than Jessica had ever seen in her life. She could rent a decent place, maybe go back to school, give the boys a better future. "No," she answered, and the word came out firm, clear. "What? I refuse. This property isn't yours to bargain with. It never was, and I'm going to prove it." Richard took 2 steps toward her, threateningly. Jessica didn't back away. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "I'll personally make sure you lose everything, this cabin, your sons, everything." "Get off my property," Jessica said, her voice low but firm. "Now." Richard stared at her for a long moment. Then he left, slamming the door hard. Jessica heard the car drive off and only then realized she was trembling. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Richard's threat regarding the boys. Could he really have the power to take her children away? The thought terrified her. But the next morning, when Mary and the other women arrived and she told them what happened, she found support. "He's scared," Mary analyzed. "If he weren't scared, he wouldn't have come here. He wouldn't have offered money." "She's right," Susan agreed. "Richard has always been a bully, but when someone really stands up to him, he backs down." "But what if he tries to take my children?" "He won't succeed," Mrs. Ruth assured her. "Now you have us, and there are many of us. If he tries anything, we'll make noise, a lot of noise." Jessica felt less alone with each passing day. Those women, strangers just weeks ago, had become her family. More family than the Andersons ever were. David called a week later with news. I managed to schedule a preliminary hearing, but Jessica, you need to know, the judge is known for favoring the Andersons. It's going to be difficult. I know, but we have evidence. Evidence that they will try to invalidate in every way possible. The hearing was scheduled for 15 days later. Jessica used that time to prepare. She studied the documents until she had memorized every word, every date. Mary helped her find appropriate clothes for the court. Mrs. Ruth looked after the children. On the day of the hearing, Jessica entered the courthouse with her legs trembling. Across the room, she saw Richard and Barbara with their private lawyer, Mr. Brentwood, who was known throughout the region. The judge, Walter Johnson, was a man in his 60s with a graying moustache and a bored expression. He flipped through the documents David presented with clear disinterest. So, Ms. Anderson alleges that Mr. Richard Anderson's property deeds are forged, he summarized with a disdainful tone. I'm not a lawyer, Your Honor, and yes, I allege that because it's the truth. The truth, the judge repeated, ironically. Do you have any proof besides these old papers that could have been fabricated by anyone? David stood up. Your Honor, these documents have notary stamps from the time, notarized signatures. Documents can be forged, Counselor, Brentwood, the Andersons' lawyer, interrupted. And they conveniently appear decades later. Please. The issue is, David insisted, that the property in question was acquired by Elizabeth Anderson with her own funds before the marriage. The documents prove it. And where is this Elizabeth? The judge asked. Why isn't she here to make the claim in person? Because she was driven out by the defendant decades ago, Your Honor, Jessica answered. Those are serious accusations, madam, the judge scolded her, without concrete proof. The proof is in the documents. Documents that could be false, Brentwood smiled. My client is willing to submit his documents for forensic analysis. And you? David hesitated. Forensic analysis was expensive. Very expensive. Jessica couldn't afford it. We need a deadline to arrange funds for the analysis, David requested. How much time? 60 days. The judge looked at Brentwood, who nodded briefly. It was a rigged game. They knew Jessica wouldn't have the money for the analysis. 60 days granted. The judge banged the gavel. Next hearing in 2 months. Jessica left the courthouse with a feeling of defeat. Even with the evidence, even with the truth on her side, the system was against her. How much does the analysis cost? She asked David on the way out. About $20,000, he admitted. But we can try to find an expert who will do it cheaper or in installments. $20,000, Jessica repeated, laughing humorlessly. It might as well be 20 million. I don't even have $20 to spare. We'll figure something out, David promised. But Jessica saw the worry in his eyes. Back at the cabin, she told everything to the women who were waiting anxiously. We need money, Mary summarized. A lot of money fast. We could pass the hat around, suggested Margaret. Everyone chips in what they can. It won't be enough, Jessica knew. You've all already done too much for me. It was then that Dorothy, who had been quiet the whole time, spoke up. What if we used the spring? They all looked at her. What spring? Jessica asked. The spring that Mary and Susan talked about, Dorothy explained. The healing water. If it still exists, if it still works, we could sell it. Not officially, of course, but person to person. Some folks would pay good money for water with medicinal properties. But where is this spring? Jessica looked at Mary. At the back of the property, or at least it used to be. Richard fenced it all off decades ago. Then we'll take the fence down, Jessica decided. It's my property. I have the right. Richard will react, Susan warned. Let him react. Jessica felt her determination grow. I'm tired of being afraid. The next day, with the help of the women and some men from the community that Dorothy had convinced, Jessica went to the back of the property. There she found the fence. Tall, new, with signs saying, private property, no trespassing. Cut it, Jessica ordered. Jessica, this could cause trouble, David, who had come along, warned. The hearing said, I'm the possible owner of this land, while the matter isn't resolved. So I'm exercising my right. The men cut the fence, and there it was. The spring, gushing crystal-clear water from a crevice in the rocks, forming a small stream that ran down the ridge. Jessica knelt and touched the water. It was ice-cold, pure. She filled a bottle and drank. It had a different taste, mineral, refreshing. "That's good water," one of the men commented. "Very good." The news spread quickly. The next day, people started showing up, wanting the water. Jessica filled bottles, accepted what they could pay. Some gave just a few coins, others, recognizing the value, paid more. But then Richard showed up, bringing men with him. Big, intimidating men. "You are trespassing on private property," he accused. "This is my property," Jessica retorted, holding a water bottle firmly. "Not until the judge decides, and you are violating an implicit order by destroying my fence." "Implicit order doesn't exist," David intervened. "And if you don't leave now, I will file a complaint for trespassing and threats." Richard's men moved forward, but stopped when they saw the number of people around Jessica. The women had come, and they weren't alone. They had brought husbands, sons, neighbors. A real crowd was protecting the spring. "This isn't over," Richard threatened before leaving, and it wasn't. 2 days later, health inspectors showed up saying they had received a complaint about contaminated water being sold illegally. They collected samples and fined Jessica for selling without a license. "I'm not selling," Jessica tried to explain. "People are donating what they can." "Donation or sale, you need a license." The inspector was inflexible. "You have 15 days to get this sorted out, or the spring will be sealed." But the water analysis brought a surprise. The report showed the water was not only safe to drink, but had a rare mineral composition with proven therapeutic properties. "This is gold," David said upon seeing the report. "Jessica, this water is worth a lot of money, a whole lot. But how do we get it sorted? How much does it cost?" "About $5,000 to start the process. Licenses, registrations, additional analyses." Jessica looked at the money she had gotten from the donations. 4,000 and a bit. Almost there, but not enough. It was then that Mrs. Ruth appeared with a different idea. "What if we made the remedies?" she suggested. "Elizabeth left the recipes. I know how to make many of them. We can use the spring water, mix it with the herbs, make small batches, sell them in the community." "That also needs a license," David pondered. "Not if it's for personal use and giving away." Ruth had looked into it. "I can make it for myself, and if someone wants to buy the ingredients to make the same thing, I'm just teaching." It was a fragile legal loophole, but it was something. Jessica, Ruth, and other women began planting the herbs that Elizabeth mentioned in the notebooks. Around the cabin, they created a medicinal garden. While the plants grew, they prepared the soil, studied the recipes, made plans. Ethan, who had recovered from bronchitis, helped water the plants. Noah crawled around the garden, always under a watchful eye. "Mommy, will the little plants grow?" Ethan would ask. "They will, my love, and they will help a lot of people," but Richard wouldn't let up. A week later, Jessica received a notification. The Andersons were suing her for emotional distress, claiming she was defaming the family's name with baseless accusations. "It's retaliation," David explained. "They want to scare you, force you to give up. I won't give up. You could end up owing even more money if you lose this lawsuit. Then I won't lose." But the pressure was mounting. Every day, a new problem. The electricity that Jessica had managed to install with the women's help was cut off, citing irregularities. The access road to the property was blocked with chains, forcing her to take a much longer route. Ethan started having nightmares. He would wake up crying, saying that bad men were going to take them away. "No one is going to take us." Jessica would calm him, but she felt her own fear growing too. Noah, sensitive to the tense environment, became fussy, crying more than usual. One night Jessica sat with Mary on the cabin's porch watching the stars. "Sometimes I think about giving up," she admitted, taking the money Richard offered, leaving, starting somewhere else. "And sometimes thinking that way is normal," Mary replied, "and you're tired, scared, it's human. But then I think about Elizabeth, about everything she lost, about all the other people the Andersons have destroyed. And I think about my boys. What lesson would I be teaching them if I gave up now? The lesson that surviving is also a form of resistance. Mary placed a hand on Jessica's shoulder. There's no shame in choosing peace. But that wouldn't be peace, Jessica realized. It would be surrender. And I've lived surrendered for too long. When I married Michael, I surrendered to his family's wishes. I left my job, my dreams, everything. And for what? To be here, alone, with nothing. You're not alone. Mary squeezed her shoulder. You have us. I know. And it's for you all that I need to keep going too. Because if I succeed, maybe other people will too. Maybe the Andersons will finally pay for what they've done. The first harvest of the herbs was modest but promising. Mrs. Ruth taught Jessica how to prepare the teas, the tinctures, the ointments that Elizabeth detailed in the notebooks. You have to be careful, Ruth warned. Herbs are medicine, but they can also be harmful if used wrong. They tested the preparations among themselves first. A tea for a headache here, an ointment for joint pain there. It worked. The women reported improvements. Dorothy, who had suffered from arthritis for years, was amazed when the ointment Jessica prepared eased the pain. This is miraculous, she declared. It's not a miracle, Ruth corrected. It's knowledge. Knowledge that's been passed down for generations, but that the modern world has forgotten. They started distributing the preparations in the community. People came back saying it worked, asking for more, and with that, the donations increased. Jessica set aside every penny for the expert analysis, for the water license, for the boys' food, for the future she was trying to build. But Barbara had other plans. One morning, Jessica woke to urgent knocking on the door. It was Susan, breathless. Barbara is spreading lies, she announced, saying that the medicines you make made an elderly lady very sick. What lady? Mrs. Gloria. She lives near the church. Jessica felt her blood run cold. Mrs. Gloria had come to get a tea for constipation the previous week. I need to see her, Jessica decided. They went together to Mrs. Gloria's house. The lady was fine, sitting on the porch, calm. Mrs. Gloria, I was told you got sick, Jessica asked, concerned. Sick? The lady laughed. I've never been better. That tea worked very well. So you're not sick? No, dear. In fact, do you have any more of that tea? My sister needs some. Jessica sighed with relief. It was Barbara's lie, but the damage was already done. Some people had believed it and stopped seeking the remedies. Worse, the next day, health inspectors returned. This time, with a search and seizure order. We received a complaint about the illegal practice of medicine, the inspector said. We need to confiscate all the products. I'm not practicing medicine, Jessica protested. I just make teas, like anyone can do at home. The complaint says you are selling them, advertising cures for diseases. That is illegal. They took everything, all the preparations Jessica had made. Weeks of work, confiscated in minutes. Jessica sat on the floor and cried when they left. She cried out of anger, frustration, and exhaustion. Ethan, seeing his mother cry, came and hugged her with his small arms. Don't cry, Mommy, he said in his sweet voice. You said we are strong. Jessica hugged her son, feeling the weight of her own words. She had said that to him. She had promised they would be strong. And now, when he needed to see that, she was falling apart. You're right, my love. She wiped her tears. We are strong, and we will continue to be. But how? Without the remedies, without the possibility of selling the water until it was regulated, how would they get money for the expert analysis? The answer came from an unexpected place. A journalist from a local news website had heard rumors about the dispute. She sought Jessica for an interview. I don't know if it's a good idea, Jessica hesitated. The Andersons could use this against me. Or it could be your chance to tell your side of the story, the journalist Patricia argued. People need to know what's happening. David was against it. Jessica, exposure like this could bring problems. The judge might see it as an attempt at public pressure. But it could also bring support, Mary pondered. People who want to help. Jessica decided to take the risk. She told her story to Patricia. About Michael, about his family, about the cabin, about Elizabeth, everything. The article came out 3 days later, and it went viral. It spread on social media, was shared thousands of times. People from all over the country began to comment, to be outraged by Elizabeth's story, by what Jessica was going through. And they started to donate. Small amounts, but from many people. $5 here, 10 there, some 20. In 1 week, Jessica had almost $12,000 in donations. It's enough for the expert analysis, David confirmed, emotional. And there's a little left over to start the water regularization process. But with the exposure came attacks too. Richard gave an interview refuting the story, calling Jessica an opportunist, a liar. Barbara cried in a video, saying they were defaming the memory of her dead son. Social media became divided. Some supported Jessica, others the Andersons. The battle had left the courts and invaded the internet. Ethan didn't understand why people were talking about Mommy on television, why some were saying bad things about her. People don't always understand the truth, Jessica tried to explain, but one day they will understand. The expert analysis was scheduled. Jessica brought all the documents that Elizabeth had kept. The expert, a serious man with thick glasses, examined each paper meticulously. "I'm going to need a few weeks," he informed her. "It's a lot of documentation. I need to verify the authenticity of stamps, signatures, the paper from that time." "How long?" "About 40 days for the full report." 40 days. Jessica would have to wait 40 days to find out if the evidence she had would be considered valid. Meanwhile, life went on. The plants in the medicinal garden grew. Noah took his first steps. Ethan started helping more with the household chores, and the women kept coming, bringing food, help, support. That network of solidarity was what kept Jessica standing. One night, Mary arrived agitated, with an envelope in her hands. "A letter came," she announced, "for you, from the post office, with a Chicago postmark." Jessica opened it with trembling hands. Inside, a handwritten letter, with the shaky handwriting of an elderly person. "Dear Jessica, I read about you in the news, about the cabin, about the fight you are facing, and I need to tell you something. My name is Elizabeth Anderson. Yes, that Elizabeth. I am still alive, living in Chicago for decades, running, always running, afraid that Richard would find me. When I saw your face in the photos, when I read about my son, my Michael, who passed away without me ever having the chance to explain, to ask for forgiveness, I felt my heart break again. But I also felt hope, because you are doing what I never had the courage to do. You are fighting, you are resisting. The documents you found, I hid them, hoping that one day someone would find them, someone who had the strength I lacked. I'm old now, sick, with little time left. But I can testify. I can tell the judge, the world, what Richard did. If you accept me as an ally in this fight, I will be there. I will be. With hope and gratitude, Elizabeth. Jessica read the letter 3 times before she could speak. She's alive, she whispered. Michael's mother is alive. Mary held the letter with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. My cousin, she cried. After all these years. Jessica picked up the phone and called David immediately. David, Elizabeth is alive, and she wants to testify. This changes everything, David replied, his voice full of emotion. Absolutely everything. With her testimony, with the documents, we have a solid case, very solid. But what if it's a trap? Jessica suddenly doubted. What if it's Richard trying to trick me? I'll check, David promised. I'll go to Chicago if I need to, but Jessica, is the sender's address on the letter? It is. Then I'll go tomorrow. David went, and he returned 2 days later with news that changed everything. It's her, he confirmed. Elizabeth Anderson, now 85 years old. She is frail but lucid, and she is as angry at Richard as you are. Is she really going to testify? She is, and she brought more documents, things she saved all these years, diaries, letters, even photos from the time of the inn. When can we schedule the deposition? She wants to come in person. She said she needs to see the place one last time, see what happened to her dream. A week later, Elizabeth arrived. Mary went to pick her up at the bus station, and when the car stopped in front of the cabin, Jessica felt her legs go weak. From the car door emerged a small lady, bent with age. Completely white hair pulled into a bun, light eyes that must have once been vibrant but were now soft, tired. She wore a simple dress. A cane helped support her. "Mary." The voice was weak, but emotional. "My Mary." The cousins hugged, crying. Decades of separation, of pain, of longing, all breaking in that embrace. Then Elizabeth turned to Jessica. "You," she said simply. "You are my son's wife." "I was," Jessica corrected gently. "Michael is gone." "I know." Tears streamed down Elizabeth's wrinkled face. "And I never got to say goodbye. I never got to tell him I didn't abandon him by choice. He didn't know. Richard told him I had died, told him I never loved him, lied about everything." Ethan, curious about the visitor, appeared in the doorway holding Noah's hand. "Who is the grandma?" he asked. Elizabeth looked at the boys, and her face transformed. She saw Michael in Ethan's dark eyes, saw familiar features in Noah's little face. "My grandchildren," she whispered, and almost fell. Mary held her. "My son's children." Jessica made a sign to Ethan. "Come meet your great-grandmother," she said. Ethan, always polite, came closer and extended his little hand. "Hi, Grandma, I'm Ethan, and this is Noe." Elizabeth knelt down with difficulty and hugged the boys. She cried so much that Jessica feared it would harm her. "It's okay," Mary reassured. "They're good tears, of relief, of joy." Later, Jessica guided Elizabeth through the cabin. The woman touched the walls as if they were made of solidified memories. "This was the kitchen," she murmured. "Over there, the dining room. We had big tables, always full. Laughter, conversations, life." "And now?" Jessica asked gently. "Now they're ruins of what was," Elizabeth answered, but without bitterness. "But ruins that can be rebuilt. You are doing that, aren't you? Rebuilding what Richard destroyed." "I'm trying." "No, dear." Elizabeth held her hand with surprising strength. "You are succeeding. I see it in your eyes. You have the strength I lacked." They spent the afternoon talking. Elizabeth told her about the life she had to build in Chicago. She worked as a seamstress, then as a cook in a school. She lived modestly, always afraid, always looking back. "Why didn't you come back when Richard got old?" Jessica asked. "When he couldn't do anything anymore?" "Because the pain was too deep," Elizabeth admitted, "and because I thought everyone would have forgotten me, that there was nothing left for me here. But Mary never forgot. I know, and I will never forgive myself for distancing myself from her too. But I was so afraid that Richard would use anyone I loved against me." That night, Elizabeth slept in the cabin. Jessica gave her her own room, improvised but clean, and in the morning, when the sun rose over the ridge, Elizabeth asked to see the spring. They walked slowly there, Elizabeth leaning on her cane and Mary's arm. "It's still here," Elizabeth smiled upon seeing the water gushing out. "Richard couldn't kill it. He fenced it off, blocked access for decades," Jessica told her, "but the water kept flowing." Elizabeth knelt with difficulty and touched the water. "Just like the truth. It can be blocked, hidden, but eventually it flows." She drank from the water, closed her eyes. "It tastes like memory," she whispered. "Like everything that was, like everything that still can be." The date of the final hearing was approaching. The expert report had arrived. The documents were authentic, they truly dated from the indicated time, and the signatures were genuine. "We have a case," David said, euphoric, "with Elizabeth testifying, with the reports, with everything. Jessica, we can win this." But Richard wouldn't give up easily. The day before the hearing, Barbara appeared at the cabin. Alone, without Richard, Jessica received her cautiously. "What do you want?" Barbara seemed different, older, tired, without the usual haughtiness. "I want to make you a proposal," she said, her voice low. "I'm not interested." "You haven't even heard it yet." "I don't need to. Anything that comes from you or Richard doesn't interest me." Barbara sighed deeply. It's not from Richard. It's mine. He doesn't even know I'm here. Jessica crossed her arms but didn't send her away. Speak. Drop the lawsuit. Accept a generous settlement. Very generous. $500,000, tax-free, and we guarantee a future for your children. Education, healthcare, everything. $500,000, a fortune. Jessica could start a completely new life, give the boys everything they needed. And, in return, you disappear. You move to another city, never speak the name Anderson again, never contact Elizabeth or spread lies about the family. Lies, Jessica repeated, incredulous. You still call them lies? Call it whatever you want, Barbara was impatient. But that's the offer, final offer. Why? Jessica asked. Why so much effort to silence me? Barbara hesitated, then admitted, because if the truth comes out, if people find out what Richard did to Elizabeth, what the family did, everything we built will collapse. It's not just the property. It's the reputation, the businesses, everything. Good, Jessica said simply. What? Good that it collapses, good that everyone knows, good that they pay for what they did. You're being foolish, Barbara hissed. $500,000, think of your children. I am thinking of them, Jessica replied calmly. I'm thinking about the example I want to set. If I accept this money, I'll be teaching them that it's right to sell out, that truth has a price, that justice can be bought. I don't want my children to learn that. They'll learn what it's like to go hungry, Barbara practically shouted, because that's what will happen when you lose. Then I will lose with dignity. Jessica opened the door. Now get out. Barbara left, slamming the door hard. But Jessica saw something in her before she left. Fear. Barbara was truly afraid. The final hearing was scheduled in a larger room due to public interest. Reporters, onlookers, Jessica's supporters, everyone wanted to be present. On Jessica's side sat David, Elizabeth, Mary, and some of the women who supported her. On the other side, Richard, Barbara, Brentwood, and a team of lawyers. Judge Walter entered, and everyone stood. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, let us begin the final hearing for the property dispute case filed by Jessica Anderson against Richard Anderson. David stood up. Your Honor, we would like to call our first witness, Elizabeth Anderson. A murmur went through the room. Brentwood immediately stood up. Objection! This witness was not on the original list. She was added later with proper notification, David countered. We have the paperwork. The judge checked the papers and nodded. You may call the witness. Elizabeth stood up, supported by Mary, and walked to the witness stand. Richard paled when he saw her. His eyes widened, his mouth opened, but no sound came out. You, he finally managed to whisper. But you were dead. You would have liked me to be, Elizabeth replied, her voice firm despite her age. It would have been more convenient. Order! The judge banged the gavel. Mr. Richard, control yourself. David approached Elizabeth. Mrs. Elizabeth, can you tell us your story? And Elizabeth told it. She spoke about the inn she built, about how she bought the land with her own money, savings from years of working, about how she turned a simple cabin into a thriving business, about the spring she discovered, and how people came from far away to fetch the water. Richard married me when I already had all that, she explained. He built nothing. He just took advantage. Brentwood stood up to challenge her. And do you have proof of these accusations? I do, Elizabeth motioned to Mary, who brought over a box. I have the land purchase receipts in my name. I have contracts with suppliers, all signed by me. I have the inn's guest register with my handwriting, my management. I have photos from that time showing me running the place while Richard was in town spending money. And why did you remain silent all these years? Brentwood attacked. If what you say is true, why didn't you fight back before? Because I was afraid, Elizabeth admitted without shame. Richard threatened me. He said that if I tried anything, I would never see my son again. And back then, women didn't have the rights they have today. I was just another troublesome wife, they said, unstable. That's what Richard spread about me. Richard stood up, furious. Lies, they're all lies. Mr. Richard, sit down, the judge ordered. She's making it all up to harm my family. Final warning, Mr. Richard. But Richard did not quiet down. That woman stole years of my life, made a fool of me, betrayed me. Elizabeth turned to him, her eyes shining with tears and anger. Did I betray you? Me, who worked from sunup to sundown while you drank and wasted money? Me, who built everything from nothing, did I steal from you? You stole my life, Richard. You stole my son. You stole my dream. The uproar in the courtroom was immense. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly. Order! Order in this court! It took several minutes to calm everyone down. Richard was forced to sit, visibly shaken. Elizabeth continued her testimony, more composed now. She told how Richard had thrown her out, how she was left on the street with just one suitcase, how she had to start over from scratch in Chicago, about how she suffered for decades, always afraid of being found. And my son, her voice broke. My Michael. Grew up thinking his mother had died, that she didn't love him. When he learned the truth, it was already too late. He was gone. And how did you learn about this hearing? David asked. From the news. I saw Jessica's story. I recognized the cabin in the photos. And I knew it was time to stop running. It was time for the truth to come out. Brentwood tried to discredit Elizabeth, questioned her memory due to her age, suggested she was being manipulated, but Elizabeth resisted every question, her answers always firm, consistent. Then it was Jessica's turn to testify. She told her story from her marriage to Michael to the mocked inheritance to the current fight. And why didn't you accept the settlement that was offered? David asked. Mr. Richard offered considerable sums to end the dispute. Because it's not about money, Jessica answered. It never was. It's about justice, about truth, about making sure what happened to Elizabeth, to me, to so many other people doesn't go unpunished. It was then that Brentwood raised a point no one expected. Mrs. Jessica, don't you find it convenient that all these documents, all these testimonies appear right now, just when you need them? The documents were there all along, Jessica replied. Elizabeth hid them decades ago, hoping someone would find them, and I found them. How fabricated them? Brentwood suggested. The expert report proved their authenticity, David interjected. Reports can be bought. Are you accusing the expert of fraud? The judge asked sternly. Brentwood backed down. I'm merely suggesting this whole story is just a little too convenient. That's when something unexpected happened. Barbara stood up. It's not, she said simply. Everyone looked at her. Richard pulled her arm. What are you doing? Sit down. No. Barbara pulled free. Enough. Enough of the lies. Barbara. Richard's voice held a threatening tone. Your Honor, Barbara addressed the judge. May I testify? The judge looked at Brentwood, who seemed panicked. My client is under emotional distress. She asked if she can testify. The judge cut him off. And she may. Mrs. Barbara, approach the stand. Barbara walked to the witness stand. Richard was livid, visibly trying to control himself. Mrs. Barbara, the judge began. Do you understand you are under oath and must tell the truth? I do, and that's exactly why I'm here. Because I need to tell the truth finally. Proceed. Barbara took a deep breath. Everything Elizabeth said is true, she began. I know because I was there. I was the young woman Richard brought in to humiliate his wife. I was the mistress he used to destroy her marriage. A shocked silence fell over the room. Richard promised me he would get rid of her, that we would get married, that I would have everything, Barbara continued, tears streaming. And I did. But it was built on lies, on another woman's pain. And I've carried that guilt all these years. Barbara, shut your mouth. Richard tried to stand up, but security guards held him back. I will not be silent. Barbara faced her husband for the first time in decades. I've lived in silence for too long. I watched you do to Jessica what you did to Elizabeth. I watched you humiliate, manipulate, destroy, and I can't anymore. Are you confirming that the accusations of document fraud are true? The judge asked. I am. Barbara nodded affirmatively. Richard falsified the papers. I saw it. I helped, God forgive me. He had a contact at the records office who authenticated everything. The property always belonged to Elizabeth, Always. The uproar was uncontrollable. Richard was shouting, Brentwood was trying to control the damage, reporters were all talking at once. The judge banged his gavel so many times it seemed the wood would crack. When he finally restored order, the judge looked at Richard with a severe expression. Mr. Richard, the accusations are serious. Document forgery, fraud. This will have consequences beyond this hearing. Richard was pale, defeated. For the first time, Jessica saw the powerful man crumble. The judge deliberated for 3 days. When he called everyone back into the room, his decision was clear. After analyzing all the evidence, testimonies, and reports, I rule in favor of the plaintiff, Jessica Anderson, he announced. The property in question legally belongs to Elizabeth Anderson, having been obtained by Richard Anderson through proven fraud. As Elizabeth formally ceded her rights to her daughter-in-law via a document notarized yesterday, the property is transferred entirely to Jessica Anderson. Jessica could hardly believe it. She had won. Truly won. Furthermore, the judge continued, I order that the defendant, Richard Anderson, be investigated for document forgery and fraud. The case files will be forwarded to the district attorney's office. Richard was escorted out of the room, destroyed. Barbara stayed, and as she passed Jessica, she stopped. I'm sorry, she said simply. Sorry for everything. Jessica didn't know how to respond. Part of her wanted to scream, to curse, but she saw on Barbara's face the same weariness she herself felt. The weariness of years being controlled, manipulated, slowly destroyed. You were a victim too, Jessica finally said. It just took you a long time to realize it. Barbara nodded, tears falling, and walked away. Outside the courthouse, a crowd was waiting for Jessica. People from the community, supporters from social media, reporters. Everyone wanted to talk to her. How do you feel? A reporter asked. Jessica looked at Elizabeth by her side, at Mary, at all the women who had supported her. I feel that justice, even if slow, arrives, she answered, and that we are never alone when we fight for what is right. In the following months, Jessica's life changed completely. With the property legally hers, she obtained all the necessary permits. The spring water was bottled and sold, generating considerable income. The medicinal garden grew, and with advice from Mrs. Ruth and following Elizabeth's notebooks, she established a small natural products company. The cabin was rebuilt, not as an inn this time, but as a community center, a place where women from the region could learn trades, share knowledge, find support. Elizabeth lived to see it all. She spent her last months in the cabin, teaching Jessica everything she knew. She saw her grandchildren grow up, told stories of Michael as a child, and healed old wounds through presence and love. When she passed away, on a quiet autumn afternoon, she was at peace. Jessica was by her side, holding her hand. Thank you, Elizabeth whispered, for finishing what I couldn't. Thank you, Jessica replied, for starting it, for planting the seeds, for never giving up completely. Take care of the place, were Elizabeth's last words. Take care of the truth, take care of what is right. I will take care, Jessica promised. Elizabeth's funeral brought together the whole community. Richard didn't show up. He was facing legal proceedings, his fortune crumbling as more frauds were discovered. Barbara came. She stood at the back, respecting the distance. Ethan, now 6 years old, placed flowers on his great-grandmother's coffin. Will Grandma Elizabeth take care of Daddy up in heaven? He asked Jessica. She will, Jessica hugged him. They will finally be together. 2 years after the hearing, the cabin was unrecognizable, rebuilt, painted, alive. The community center welcomed dozens of women weekly. Some learned to make natural products, others learned to read and write, others just found a safe place to exist. Jessica established a fund in Elizabeth's name, which helped women in difficult situations. Mary was the administrator, ensuring every penny was used correctly. Ethan started school, a bright and sensitive boy. Noah grew up curious, always exploring, always asking. Both knew the story of their great-grandmother, their father, and the fight their mother had fought. And they learned that justice is worth it, even when it's hard. Jessica never married again, not for lack of opportunity, but because she was complete. She had her children, her work, her community. She had peace. Barbara also changed. She left the big house, the Anderson name, everything. She moved to a small town and started a simple life. Sometimes she wrote to Jessica asking for news. Jessica replied briefly but kindly. They weren't friends. They never would be. But there was something resembling forgiveness between them. Richard lost everything. The investigations revealed decades of fraud, extortion, and manipulations. Many people he had destroyed over his life finally found the courage to testify. He spent his last years answering lawsuits, watching his empire crumble. The spring kept flowing. The pure, crystal-clear water that Elizabeth had discovered decades ago now benefited hundreds of people. Jessica never charged a high price, keeping it affordable. It wasn't about profit. It never was. One morning, 5 years after the hearing, Jessica was in the medicinal garden when she saw a group of women arriving. Some she knew, others she didn't. "Can we talk?" one of them asked. Of course, Jessica invited them to sit on the porch. The woman, about 40 years old, began, "We're going through a situation similar to yours. A powerful man in town is trying to take our land. We heard your story and we wanted to know if you could help us, guide us." Jessica looked at those women. She saw in them the same desperation she had felt, the same fear, but also the same determination. "I will help," she promised. "Not just me. We have a network now, women who have been through what we have, who know how to fight, who know how to resist. You are not alone." And they weren't. That afternoon, more than 20 women gathered at the cabin. They shared experiences, strategies, and hope. Jessica realized that Elizabeth's fight, her own fight, was not isolated. It was part of something bigger, a silent but powerful resistance of women refusing to be erased, destroyed, forgotten. "You know," Jessica said to the group, "each of us has a story of pain, of loss, perhaps, but also of resistance, of rebuilding. And when we join our stories together, we create something stronger than any opposition." The women listened intently. "Elizabeth planted the seeds, I watered them, and now you will also reap. Because the truth, justice, what's right, they may take time, they may cost dearly, but in the end, they are always worth it." Ethan came out of the house at that moment, holding Noah's hand. The two had grown so much. Ethan was 9 now, Noah was 5. They sat at Jessica's feet, listening to the women's conversations. "Mom," Ethan whispered, "are we going to help these people?" "We are," Jessica confirmed. "We will always help those in need. That's how we honor Grandma Elizabeth, Dad, everyone who came before us." That night, when the women had left and the children were asleep, Jessica stayed on the porch looking at the stars. Mary came to sit beside her, bringing tea. "Tired?" the older woman asked. "A little," Jessica admitted, "but it's a good tiredness, from a day well lived." "Elizabeth would be proud," Mary said, "of what you've done with her place, of what you've done with her story. I didn't do it alone. You, Susan, Ruth, all of you. Without you, none of this would exist. But you were the one who had the courage to stand up to the Andersons, to say no when it would have been easier to say yes. That made all the difference." Jessica thought about the last few years, about everything she had been through, the difficulties, the fear, the uncertainty, but also the discovery of a strength she never knew she had, of a community she never knew existed, of a purpose she never imagined she would find. "You know what's funny?" Jessica smiled. "When Richard and Barbara gave me that ruined cabin as a joke, they thought they were destroying me, giving me the worst they could. But they gave me everything. They gave me purpose. They gave me a fight. They gave me a way to discover who I really am." Sometimes, Mary pondered, what seems like a curse is a blessing in disguise. Or sometimes we turn the curse into a blessing. We refuse to be the victim they expected. That too. They fell silent for a while, just listening to the sounds of the night. Pinewood Ridge had its own music, wind in the trees, crickets singing, the water from the spring somewhere, always flowing. "What comes next?" Mary finally asked. "More of the same, I suppose," Jessica replied. "Keep helping those in need, keep building. The boys are growing up. They're going to need more. Better education, opportunities. I want to make sure they have that. And for you, any personal dreams? Jessica thought. Maybe study more about medicinal plants. Take a proper course. Document everything I learned from Elizabeth and Ruth, so it isn't lost. Write the true history of the Anderson family, so no one forgets what happened. A book? Maybe. A record at least, so that other Jessicas, other Elizabeths know they are not alone. That resistance is possible. That victory is possible. Mary smiled, placing her hand on Jessica's shoulder. You became exactly what they tried to destroy. A strong, independent woman who won't bow down. It must drive them crazy. I hope so, Jessica laughed. It would only be fair after everything. The years kept passing. The community center grew. It helped hundreds of women. Some learned trades and opened their own businesses. Others found the courage to leave abusive situations. Others still discovered they had rights, that they could fight. Jessica recorded everything. Every story, every small victory, every transformation. She wrote not only about Elizabeth and herself, but about Mary, Susan, Ruth, Margaret, all the women who formed that network of resistance and support. The book, when it was finally published, made an impact. It sold well regionally, sparked discussions about women's rights, about how power can be used to destroy or to build. Schools began using it as study material. Universities invited Jessica to give lectures. It's strange, Jessica confessed to Mary during one of these lecture trips. Years ago, I didn't know who I was. I lived in Michael's shadow, in the shadow of his family. Now I have my own voice. People want to hear what I have to say. Because you have something important to say, Mary replied. You lived through something important, and you turned pain into purpose. Ethan, at 15, decided to study law. He wanted to be a lawyer, to help people like his mother did. Noah, at 11, was fascinated by plants, spending hours in the medicinal garden studying each species. I'm going to be a scientist, he declared. I'm going to study the plants, discover more medicines, help more people. Jessica watched her sons grow and was filled with pride, not just for who they were, but for what they represented. The victory over the Andersons wasn't just legal, material, it was generational. It was about showing her children that ordinary people can face giants and win. Richard passed away when Ethan was 17, alone, bankrupt, forgotten. Jessica felt no joy at the news, but she didn't feel pity either. She felt only closure. A chapter finally finished. Barbara continued to live in her small town. Sometimes she still wrote. The letters were always brief, asking for forgiveness in different ways. Jessica responded, polite but distant. Forgiving didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean being friends. It just meant letting go of the anger, moving forward. On the 20th anniversary of the hearing that changed everything, Jessica organized a celebration at the cabin. Not a celebration of the legal victory, but of everything they had built since then. Hundreds of people showed up. Women the center had helped, their families, supporters, friends. The cabin and its surroundings were unrecognizable. Where there had once been ruins, there were now gardens, solid buildings, a vibrant life. Ethan, now a licensed lawyer working specifically on cases involving women's and property rights, gave a speech. My mother taught me that justice isn't what happens in the courtroom, he said. Justice is what we build every day with our choices, our actions. It's refusing to accept the wrong as normal. It's lifting up those who have been knocked down. It's turning pain into strength. Noah, a biology student focused on medicinal botany, also spoke. Plants teach us a lot, he shared. For you can pull up a tree, but if the root survives, it grows back, stronger. My great-grandmother Elizabeth was that root. They tried to pull her up, but she survived. And my mother made her grow again, stronger than ever. Jessica listened to her sons, tears streaming down. She thought of everything she had been through. The day of the will, when they laughed at her. The first terrible night in the cabin. The cold, the hunger, the despair. The women who showed up. The discovery of the documents. The meeting with Elizabeth, the hearing, the victory, and everything that came after. When it was her turn to speak, Jessica went to the front and looked at all those people. 20 years ago, she began, they gave me a ruined cabin as a joke, as a final insult. They wanted me to fail, to give up, to disappear. And they almost succeeded. But I learned something in these years. I learned that no matter how ruined something seems, it can always be rebuilt. No matter how dark the night, dawn always comes. And no matter how alone we feel, there is always someone willing to help if we allow it. This cabin was a joke, but it became a home. It became hope. It became proof that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they refuse to accept the unjust as inevitable. So I thank you. I thank those who laughed, because they gave me motivation. I thank those who supported, because they gave me strength. I thank Elizabeth, who planted the seeds, and I thank all of you who harvested the fruits with me. Because in the end, this story isn't just mine. It's all of ours, of every woman who has ever been underestimated, ridiculed, humiliated, and who stood up, who fought, who won. The applause was deafening. Women cried, hugged each other, celebrated. It was more than a party. It was an affirmation, a declaration that they existed, that they mattered, that they were strong. At night, when everyone had left and silence returned to the ridge, Jessica walked to the spring. The water kept flowing, tireless, eternal, just like resilience, just like hope. "We did it, Elizabeth," she whispered to the wind. "We managed to turn your pain into something beautiful, your fight into victory, your story into inspiration." And there, under the stars, to the sound of flowing water, Jessica felt complete peace. The journey had been hard, but it had been worth it. Every tear, every fear, every moment of despair, it all led to that moment of fullness. She returned to the cabin, where Ethan and Noah were waiting. "Ready for bed?" she asked. "Mom," Ethan said, "when you look at all this, at everything you've built, do you regret anything? Would you have done anything differently?" Jessica thought. "Maybe I would have asked for help sooner. Maybe I would have trusted people more. But overall, no. I would do it all again. Because every step, no matter how difficult, brought me here, and here is exactly where I need to be." "What about us?" Noah asked. "Are we what you hoped we would be?" "You are more—" Jessica hugged them. "You are so much more than I could have dreamed. You are proof that breaking cycles is possible, that we can create something better, fairer, more loving." That night, the three slept together like they did when Ethan and Noah were little, united, safe, at peace. And in the years that followed, the story of the cabin continued to be told. Mothers told daughters, teachers told students, women told women, always with the same core message. No matter how impossible it seems, resisting is worth it, fighting is worth it, believing is worth it. Because sometimes what seems like a cruel joke turns into the greatest blessing. Sometimes ruins become the foundation for something extraordinary. And sometimes underestimated women prove to be the strongest of all. The cabin in the mountains, which began as an insult, ended as a monument, not to wealth or power, but to human resilience, to the ability to turn pain into purpose, to refuse to be a victim, to build beauty upon ashes. And Jessica, the ridiculed young widow who arrived there with 2 sons and a broken heart, proved that strength doesn't come from where we are born or who we know. It comes from within, from choices, from refusing to give up even when it would be easier. She inherited an old cabin as a joke and turned it into a legacy. End of story. And you, what did you think of this story of overcoming? Have you been through something similar? Tell us in the comments. Don't forget to leave your like if the story moved you, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories like this one. Your presence here makes all the difference.